Hey folks, I just want to let you know about my upcoming book, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. If you're looking for a job or you think you might be looking for a job in the future and you're trying to up your mobility and meet new people and things like that, this book walks you through the whole process. So go ahead and check it out. It comes out on November 20th. It'll be on Amazon, and you can find it as The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job.
Welcome to Elixir Mix, your weekly Elixir podcast, talking with members of the community. My name is Mark Erickson, and today I'm joined with Michael Reese.
IO.puts Michael.
And today we have our special guest, Jason Fertel. Jason, can you give us a little background as to who you are and why we have you here?
Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm Jason Fertel. I run the marketing automation engineering team at PepsiCo eCommerce. And I'm here to talk about some of the things we've been doing with Elixir at PepsiCo and how we got to where we are and, some of the fun things we're working on.
Awesome.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open source Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
Because I know you guys had a sponsor presentation spot at ElixirConf 2019, and I was really impressed with just what you guys were doing, and then when I went and looked back at the Elixir videos, I didn't see that among the videos. And maybe if it is there, I just couldn't find it. But I just wanted to make sure people are aware of what PepsiCo is doing and that they were sponsoring this event. And a lot of the reasons I think it is important to have you guys on and give you guys a chance to share what you're doing is because I think of that developer who's in their current workplace and they're trying to talk to their team and their VP or whoever it is, and they're promoting Elixir. Because I've been that guy, right? I've been that guy who's promoting Elixir, and a lot of the questions that come back are, well, who's using Elixir? And being able to point to large companies that have made a bet and are currently using it is a really big kind of validation. And so that's something that I think people want to be able to have as a resource. So I would love to hear about just kind of, maybe you can kind of share a little bit about what you guys shared at the ElixirConf for those people who weren't there and weren't able to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I could go through the presentation now if you want. I could share it if you guys are interested and walk you through it. But I know it's obviously an audio-based medium. We can describe the different slides because I think it was funny. If everybody was there, it was a good time. So why don't I just do that and we could go from there. So I'm going to share. So essentially, I put a bunch of slides together, and one of the things, especially early on when I came on board to PepsiCo eCommerce, which I'll talk about a little bit after this, I was worried about being able to hire great engineers for a company like PepsiCo because it's not a tech company. We're a food and beverage company. We make snacks. We make soda and water and all these different things where you're like, well, why would I as a engineer want to go work at a company like that? And we'll get into this as well, but I think partially Elixir has helped a lot in that, because I think it shows people that we're serious about this. And I think we, to be frank, would have a lot of issues if we were a Node or Rails or whatever shop. So can you guys see the screen here?
Yeah. And actually, Jason, can you just give a quick background of what's one project that your team helps to deliver? For me, I've never worked at a company the size of PepsiCo. And so when we talk about e-commerce, PepsiCo e-commerce specifically, and then marketing automation more particularly, I don't have a good sense for what does that team do.
Yeah, I think maybe we could give you some background sort of how I ended up, because I was the one who brought Elixir into PepsiCo and kind of how I ended up there. About 4 years ago, I started a company with some folks who founded a ad exchange called OpenX, which happens to be a large Erlang user, which has nothing to do with this part of the story, but that's just an aside. And we were working on a product in the ad tech space. Some of the things we ended up building, we decided Elixir would be a good fit for. We ran out of money, folded the company, managed to start a new company, and PepsiCo happened to be our first customer. And it just made sense for us to come on board with them. So there was a small acquisition, and RIP came in with us. And that's how Elixir came on board. One of the first meetings I had there was like, well, nobody here knows Elixir. And so are we going to port this to Python? And I was like, no, not going to happen. So essentially, we started building the product there in Elixir, and we then hired my boss, a guy named Mark Tofik, who used to run engineering at a company called User Testing, which is a Rails-based company. And I think his experience, obviously with Ruby, and just the fact that a lot of folks from User Testing had a strong interest in Elixir, when he came on board as my boss to build out a much larger engineering organization, he was aware and essentially all for using Elixir, because he was able to bring on some folks from User Testing as well, which partially based on the fact that they would get to work in Elixir. So essentially, like, that is the birth of Elixir there. We ended up bringing on another person in another small kind of acquisition, and that project was based in Node. He saw that we were all working in Elixir, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to port this to Elixir. So at that moment, it officially became kind of the back-end application engineering language for PepsiCo eCommerce. So almost all new work that we do, everything that we build, that's related to sort of application development is we use Elixir for. For data engineering tasks, we do not. Like, we're fully Python for that. I think there's a lot of push, my understanding, with the community to do a lot of some of those tasks with these data pipelines in Elixir, but the tooling, the expertise out there, and the integration with data science platforms is much more.
It's just like there's a mature set of features and libraries like TensorFlow, and if you just want to leverage that just makes sense.
Yeah, and it's we use Airflow and all these different things that are meant for this, and there's people that you hire that do this, and yeah, so I don't see that changing anytime soon or ever. But in terms on the application side, we are pretty bought into Elixir. To give you a sense of what my team does and what we build, we're very much building software around. So if we went through these slides, but I'm going to just throw it over here. So our customers are the big folks in e-commerce. And it's a little deceiving, the fact that our name is PepsiCo eCommerce, because it makes it sound like we are selling product on Gatorade.com. There is a Gatorade.com where you could buy Gatorade product. We actually don't manage that at all on our team. As an example, but we are doing what we talk about with that is Amazon.com, Walmart.com, Jet, marketing for things like Kroger, Instacart, Prime Now, the grocery, any of those things that you can think of where you are going online and buying a bag of chips. We're optimizing everything from the supply chain to the marketing to the sales, which is very different than the way other CPGs in the space operate, right? So our product specifically is focused on the marketing side. So we have a workflow and automation application that essentially helps our marketing team buy search advertising on Amazon. And pretty soon, Instacart and Criteo, which is a large, ad tech company that also happens to have this product called Hook Logic. Sorry about that. All right. So basically, we work with folks like Amazon.com to help our team do search advertising on Amazon.com. Pretty soon, Instacart and Criteo, which bought a company a couple years ago called Hook Logic to manage advertising on those sites. But, a lot of our advantage, there are vendors that do some of these things. They don't work necessarily with a lot of these smaller kind of marketing platforms. So there's other vendors in the space. My company was one of them, essentially, around this, new sort of advertising. But we work with folks that nobody else is working with yet, right? Like Instacart. There's not a lot of impetus for other folks to go on Instacart. In the traditional kind of CPG world, the way folks do this is there's a media agency that they essentially outsource all their media buying to. They might have some folks doing the sales and commercialization. The marketing is very split up by brand. So there's not like this inherent focus on performance marketing inside of these large CPGs. They've always outsourced it, right, to agencies. So there's a disconnect when you have to have a very holistic strategy for how you sell your products online, right? And it's been to PepsiCo's we've been incredibly successful. I think in the earnings report last month, or I guess earlier this month, it was announced that we're doing over $2 billion globally online. So by and large, the work we do helps feed into that engine. And I like to think of the product we're building as a machine for, printing money.
Nice. Those are good machines. So you mentioned that your product kind of has this holistic view. Does that mean you take into account other things about the supply chain or about the logistics of what's being sold into like when you purchase that ad space and all those kinds of things?
We're getting there. We're not quite there yet, but that's the goal, right? And that's kind of what separates this being an in-house product versus using a vendor, is the ability to take into account, hey, what does your inventory look like on Amazon right now, right? What's your inventory in our own warehouses, right? What's your search rank on Amazon, right? Like another example would be, how your competitors are doing in certain other ways. Are they out of stock? All of these different things that maybe a vendor might not offer. On top of that, we build the product very differently than a vendor would, right? Like we are able to move a little bit faster in some ways, right? Because we don't need to focus so much on features that, while might be nice, can be solved with a SQL query, right? And that's sort of the advantage of this being in-house. And some of the things that we're building from that have sort of fallen out of it. We're able to do, for example, using the search platform on Amazon, we're able to give real-time out of stock information to our supply chain and sales teams, which is not possible with the other platforms. Sorry, the other vendors and to be honest, the way the platform itself works, we're able to get that. For example, Amazon will stop running your ad if you're out of stock, right? So that's a clear signal of, hey, you're out of stock, whereas they might not know they're out of stock for days, or they might go on and actually physically open their computer, check the page to see if they're out of stock, right? Like obviously that's of major importance to our business, is to always be in stock.
Right. Be more proactive in monitoring and tracking. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Elixir Casts create screencasts that cover a wide range of Elixir and Phoenix topics. Each episode tackles a specific problem or explores a new library, demystifying it in a language that's easy to understand. Whether you are just starting with Elixir or are using it professionally with 100 plus episodes, there's something for you. Go check them out at elixircasts.io.
I would be curious to learn how you feel Elixir has been beneficial in this solution space. Like, it's presented, like maybe we'll turn into Python. You're like, no. So I just like, we're going to keep in Elixir. Like, what do you think Elixir brought to the table that was an advantage or a benefit?
So I think, so I think going back just from my own personal experience had a lot to do with it. You know, I've been doing Elixir and Erlang since 2010. I think I started coding in Erlang. And I did that on and off until I got into Elixir, and then I was like, why would I do anything but Elixir? You know, and I think that the short answer is, you know, it was just me, and I had no interest in writing in Python, right? Like, there's that. I think the other thing is purely from like a DevOps and maintenance and all these other, when you're a one person engineering team, which is what we started as, like spinning up an MVP in Elixir Phoenix to me is much more straightforward when you might need things like, you know, a cache. Okay, we'll use ats. It's on one machine. Like, you need a cache, we use ats. Like, you need to background sending emails. Okay, we'll just spawn some processes to do that. You know, like these are the like even at the start, you hear people be like, well, you know, if I were doing an MVP, I would just do a Rails app. It's like, not like Phoenix is there to, you know, for even a toy project, it has so much more right out of the box that can let you be more efficient, build products faster than I think anything else that I've worked with. Like, if you want to do anything real time with WebSockets on the client, for example, yeah, I mean, it's so straight, like it's so unbelievably powerful, straightforward, and like easy to get started. Once you have the knowledge and ability, I think where it's what intended or unintended consequence of that is that I think it's been really good for our hiring. The first person I hired, I don't know if you guys know David Antaramian. He runs the New York City Elixir meetup, and he also runs. He's one of the organizers of the MPEX conference here in New York, and there's one in LA. I think having him, like, I don't think, like, I wouldn't have been able to get that equivalent person in another community. I'm also active in the New York City Elixir community, so that helps. But I think it was getting people on board with the vision and the fact that we're using Elixir, I think has been a much easier task to hire than what I thought. Because, again, people think of a place like PepsiCo as a stodgy sort of old company.
Yeah, I'll say from my own experience, I've seen that same thing, and actually seen it, you know, years ago with Rails. That in a way, being a Rails shop was kind of a signal to the world that, like, hey, we're an organization that's willing to take some risks because we're not an established player. And in the David versus Goliath, like, we're going to take whatever advantages we can, and that also includes technology advantages. And so I work at a small company now, and I think it is a really big hiring advantage. I mean, there are some issues that come with trying to hire Elixir developers. I'm not trying to underplay that, and I know that companies do sometimes have problems with that. But anytime you're actually hiring for kind of an up and coming technology, you get to kind of ride that wave of people who are like, oh, I really wish I could have a job writing in Elixir. And part of the reason they might come to your organization is that they want to know what it's like to deploy an application in Elixir and to maintain it and to monitor and do all the production stuff that you don't really do on a side project. And so a lot of times you get, not only do you get people who are excited about the language, but those also tend to be engineers who are highly intrinsically motivated. Depending on your organization, that might be exactly the kind of engineer you're looking for. I have always really enjoyed working with people who they're already on some sort of a journey of their own, and us working together is just a part of that journey. And so I find that those people add an immense amount of value because they are actively looking for ways to build something that's useful and something that solves the problem in a better way than what they've done in the past. And that kind of search for something good creates this a really positive feedback cycle between them and the team. And it creates a really good culture of being willing to take a risk and being able to give feedback and all those other things that I really value in an engineering team. So I've had that same sort of experience that Elixir is actually a big hiring advantage in my experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think with new technologies, they become very self-selecting, where folks that are interested in new and learning something new and learning, like, you're gonna self-select into these technologies. And also what happens as well is, as a technology like Rails gets as mainstream as it is, or Node.js, which I think I think what's great about JavaScript is the barrier to entry is so low. But at the same time, if you're hiring for JavaScript, it ends up being, you're inundated with candidates, right? Which is also can be good if you have the resources to select out the really good ones. But again, it's a very difficult task to do a lot of that, right? Whereas in some ways, the smaller pool is very self-selected to be relatively a set of stronger candidates.
Yeah, I've observed that as well. That those early adopters are people who are interested in learning, who are interested in growth, and they are often they are the kind of the people you want leading that team. So I think it's great.
Jason, could you share anything else about the tech stack that you guys are using? Are you what's your deployment look like? Do you have anything in the way that you've structured the code in terms of how your team grows and how people contribute to it?
Yeah, I think we're learning as we go along. We started, to be quite honest, we started the year with 2 people, and we're now 10, 11 engineers. So it's pretty big growth, and that all happened in about the last 5 months.
That is a lot of growth in a short amount of time.
Right.
So if those people didn't already have Elixir experience, how did you bring them up to speed?
Thankfully, we hired Elixir folks to start. Nice. I think that we're learning. That's not entirely true. Our second hire was a Python guy, but he was mostly focused on doing a lot of the Python work on our data pipeline. But he's picked up Elixir pretty well, I would say. But everybody else had a background in Elixir, or had done enough where it wasn't new to them. I think that's going to be a learning experience for us as we grow a little bit more, and more folks have to learn. A few folks on my team, we're doing an upcoming training with Erlang Solutions, so we'll see how that goes. Where some folks some of the front end folks are interested in learning kind of what we do on the back end with Elixir, and so that they're doing they're taking part in a training with them. But yeah, so back to the sort of original question about how it's structured. It's an umbrella application, for better or for worse. I think there is some legacy here from my old company, where we had a bunch of shared pieces of the code, and we actually did different deployments against different pieces of that code base using eDeliver. There's nothing fancy. We're probably, as we grow out our DevOps team here, we're probably we're still using just vanilla eDeliver deployments, which is, has its own share of issues. We just haven't put the time in necessary on the DevOps. But as we probably grow a DevOps org, we're probably going to move to Kubernetes, but I'm very much keeping my hands out of that. Because every time I've gotten near Kubernetes, I just get incredibly scared. It's like anytime I've tried to do anything with like Scala or Java, I'm just like, what are all these things? I'm just gonna take a step back and just not involve myself. Whether or not it's a good decision, I'll leave that up to I think the advantage of it is more on the DevOps side, for the management of the cluster necessarily than for our own. There's a lot of debates that about obviously using Kubernetes with Elixir, but no, we're not doing that yet, so I don't have any complaints. I will when we do.
There will be complaints when you really start pushing the boundaries on that deployment. I don't think there's any path that doesn't have some rough edges and things to bump against.
Yeah, I think right now the application is relatively small, and it is internal, so it's a smaller user base, and we're not like pumping through a lot of events and data and things like that yet. As we sort of do get a lot more into the automation, we'll see. But it's just not that this one application just isn't a huge enough application where we're running into big issues yet. Yeah, in terms of what we're using Absinthe for GraphQL, Postgres, Ecto. We built everybody on my team hates me for this, but because they all have to deal with it and maintain it. But so we use this time series database called Druid, because it's really good at sort of, these advertising related analytics workloads or queries, where you're able to very quickly essentially do group by queries over a period of time, and with in memory across terabytes of data. We're nowhere near the sort of max of it, but we essentially built a client library around that we probably should open source at some point, and then also built this abstraction layer around it using macros that I keep saying we, which is, as I'm saying, my team hates me for this. It built this, it's this great abstraction where if you, for example, are adding a field to your Druid schema, you just add the field and it just magically works, and you could query it from the client and everything's great. Yeah, that's the one case where it's great. When you actually want to add new features to that abstraction, and you have to go through all these quotes, unquotes, and everything like that. It's just and I would say most Elixir engineers rightfully and wisely are unfamiliar with how macros generally work. I think that so especially, even if you do understand how macros work and you start to dig into somebody else's code where they're doing a lot of code generation, it's just tough. It's tough to dig in and really understand it, and it's hard to, in some ways, and I've gotten better at this, hard to really split up the code well if you are doing a lot of things in some of the generation. So, but I would recommend it to everybody. Make your code magical. That's kind of a joke, but if anybody on my team ends up listening to this, they generally just complain anytime they get involved. They always say Jason's solution to every problem is a macro. and then I point them to kernel.ex where everything's a macro.
Right, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting. The whole topic of macros is a very interesting topic, and there are certainly cases where that is the only way you can solve a certain type of problem. But coming back to some of the other things that I think were interesting that I know you guys are doing there is just kind of, if I were to give some bullet points as to what I understand that you guys are doing with Elixir, is that you're doing sales and marketing automation and execution, you're doing end-to-end supply chain optimization, and I believe you're doing something kind of exploratory, if nothing else, with IoT.
Yeah. So we're on IoT. We have some prototypes we've been toying around with around essentially one of the guys on the product team was like, hey, we want to, it was somebody with Amazon, they wanted us to toy around and build something, right? And somebody on the product was like, this is going to cost us a lot of money just to even get a prototype of this, right? So I was like, this is a pretty straightforward thing to prototype. And this is also an opportunity for somebody on my team to learn nerves. So the product that he wanted to build was a auto-fulfilling Frito-Lay multi-pack, right? So I don't know if you guys are familiar. I'm sure you had these when you were kids or knew people that had them when they were kids. I didn't have them when I was a kid because my mom would never buy junk food. So I ended up, going to my friends' houses and having all these things. Sorry, our food's not junk. It's great. I didn't mean that. Everybody, we have very enjoyable snacks. We have lots of healthy options. But so snack food, my parents did not let me have snack food. There was no snacks. And the multi-packs that have the pretzels, the Doritos and all in one package, right? With the little bags that you get, that got put in your school lunch, So the idea was, let's take one of those, see if we could build a auto-fulfilling one, right? So we spec'd out an MVP, figured out what we needed, ordered a bunch of parts. They were obviously the wrong parts. So we ordered some more parts. It turned out there was some issue getting the Raspberry Pi working with these parts. You know, I suggested we use a BeagleBone. The BeagleBone ended up, I'm not a hardware guy. My understanding is in order to do some of the analog stuff you would do with the scale, right? Where it's, not, it's not a binary kind of switch. It's, based on we're using these like pressure sensitive, I don't even know what they are, but essentially these like conductive material that's pressure sensitive that, responds to the level of pressure. And I think BeagleBone has some analog inputs, which is not existent on the Raspberry Pi. So the BeagleBone was ended up being better for this prototype. I think we probably could have still used a Pi, but it was just like, it's, another $50 to buy this thing. So let's just build it with that. And then essentially the prototype, you go into the pack, you take out a bunch of things, and it sends you a text message when you're out. And that was essentially the end of the project as of now. This may be something that ends up coming to fruition and being a real thing, but right now it was just a toy, which is good, right? I think which I think is important, especially just in a culture you're trying to build, which is one of the things we're trying to do, is the ability to give people an opportunity to learn and work on things that they might not necessarily get a chance to work on. And something like that, especially the guy's very into hardware. He's like a keyboard nerd, which was all new to me. He goes to KeyCon, which is a conference for keyboard enthusiasts, which again is like kind of awesome. It's like, you go and there's like there's vendors just selling different keys,
I had no idea there was a KeyCon. So I'll link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. Obviously there's everything now at this point. The internet's a wonderful place.
One of my favorite communities to get involved with these days is the Angular community. There are so many great people there. We've had a lot of them on Adventures in Angular over the last several years. And I really wanted to just highlight people and give you a chance to get to know the flavor and the feel of being around some of these awesome people. We've talked to people on the Angular core team. We've talked to people who have organized the conferences. We've talked to some of the co-hosts that I've had on Adventures in Angular. Nowadays, Aaron Frost is running the show and he's doing the same thing. Typically, he's been doing it at conferences lately, which is a lot of fun. But you get to hear what these people are about and why they care and how they get involved with other people in the Angular community. So if you're looking for that connection in the Angular community and a way to really understand the people who are involved in the Angular community, then go check out My Angular Story. You can find it at myangularstory.com.
I think that's a really cool idea also, like you said, of kind of creating that culture of, well, let's give it a try. I've seen so many times that...
By the way, you linked the wrong KeyCon.
I realized that and I was like, dang it, I can't find the right one.
To another thing I didn't know existed.
Again, the internet is an amazing place. So yeah, and I've run into that struggle as well with Raspberry Pis. Don't have any onboard analog to digital, so you have to like do a separate chip to help do that. But that's really cool. And when you say self-fulfilling, I just want to make sure I understand this. So basically the box that contains each of the different products, which I will also say from my own childhood, my parents were very like not buying chips was a thing. I don't know why. Still to this day, like there's a lot of other food that I ate that was way more questionable than chips as a kid. But actually we would occasionally buy these multi-packs when we went on road trips, and they are like some of my fondest memories. But so what you're talking about here is something that like as you take the products out, you kind of get notified that like, hey, you should probably buy more of these. Your kids have eaten all the Doritos. Is that the way that works?
Yeah, essentially. So the idea would be this would be some device which would notify you the moment you're out or near out to make sure you order more on Amazon or Walmart or anybody else that would feasibly be using that. that's essentially the idea behind the project.
What I think is cool about what you guys were talking about is just the idea of true R&D, just kind of doing that exploratory stuff to find out what can we do, how would we do that, and then you can separately have the question of like, is that something we want to pursue now or potentially later? And so I think it's great that you guys are fostering that type of an environment.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, like, while we do a bit of R&D and we do spend time on things like that, we're not, you know, you hear a lot about, you know, at these large corporations, the labs, right? You know, trying to think of like a really boring sounding company and then add the labs at the end, right? So like,
like, are you thinking like Xerox PARC in the old days kind of a thing?
Yeah, except a lot of folks do this now where they have this like labs. So, you know, for example, you know, Jiffy Lube Labs, which is coming up with like, you know, like really like every company, like I've heard it, like a lot of banks have them, you know, where it's like, okay, we know internally we cannot produce these things. So we're going to start a labs group to do a lot of this R&D and exploratory stuff. And in some ways, you know, our group does some of those things in that we are with our you know, some of our purviews, how do we build things that the greater PepsiCo organization can use and do and work with, based on the fact that, you know, we think of software and engineering and development very different than, you know, the rest of the organization does. But at the same time, we're very much tied to revenue, right? Whereas a lot of these labs that inside these larger companies, they're not tied to their success is based on like how their ability to be successful isn't necessarily there, right? Like it's like, okay, you've built this really cool new way to Jiffy Lube your car. We don't have cars in New York. Is that how it works?
I know what you're talking about. I actually worked in fintech for a little while, and I worked with a couple of banks that had labs groups. I'm just sitting over here chuckling because I think a lot of their key metrics were like, how many patents did we file? Because they're just stockpiling IP as their metric of success in a way.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like they come up with cool stuff. Like they probably come up with cool stuff. They probably come up with somewhat innovative stuff maybe, but it's just, you know, there's nothing that makes you innovate more than, you know, having to hit a number, right? Like, or hit a metric, you know, like, or a result. And I think that's what's helpful is like our success is very clearly tied to, you know, how can we create things that make our business more successful, and in turn make, you know, PepsiCo more successful.
Yeah, a customer that tells you did it wrong. That's that's the mother of invention in my career so far.
Yep.
And I do know that, you know, as a developer, career developer, I recognize the value of being able to feel that my inputs are directly attributable or reflected somewhere in the bottom line of the company, that I'm actually making a difference. Because I feel like if I can demonstrate that I'm making a difference, then they will want to keep me and it'll raise my visibility, and I can maybe have a greater influence. So I see that as a valuable thing to be able to say, yes, our group is impacting the bottom line and we are making a difference. So that's great. So thank you for coming on, Jason, and sharing some of these things. I think right now we're going to go ahead and transition to picks. Michael, do you have one you want to share?
Yeah, I have 2 quick picks this week. I have a little side project that I mentioned in a previous episode of fixing up an old golf cart that is now driving around, and my kids crashed it into our deck. So official success metric met for me. And
did you build in like the airbags and everything?
No, it's like 1960s tech. So it's just like there's a bench seat and hopefully everyone survives. But one of the things that's been really fun to play with is I'm working on a scenic little dashboard that will show, to start with, it's going to monitor battery level. And so I've been building out like it looks like a fuel gauge. And scenic has just been a ton of fun once again to work with. And I'll end up with a little touchscreen that's like on the front of this 1960s golf cart, which will just be an interesting sort of dichotomy of old tech and new tech. And at least hopefully get my kids to charge it when it's relatively empty. And so that's been lots of fun. Thank you again to Boyd and all the people who worked on that. And then I also wanted to just throw in one quick pick for Spiff. So this is my current job. I've been working here for about 2 years, and things are kind of picking up. Sales are moving forward. Financing is looking good. And I'm probably going to be growing the team pretty soon. So if anyone is interested, I'll drop a link to kind of what the company does. And if anyone is looking for Elixir jobs, then hit me up. I'd love to chat about it. Oh, and for people wondering, we are definitely remote friendly. So we're open to remote, as well as anyone living in Utah. As long as you're within a few time zones, I think we'd love to chat.
Cool. All right. And my pick today is I wrote a blog post recently about doing Elixir development in VS Code. I know VS Code has become a very popular development environment or editor. And so this post covers the Elixir extensions that you'll want to be using, how they work, kind of what they do. So you can kind of see little screenshots of like, this is what you get out of it. And then I additionally recommend some other extensions that help improve code navigation and a theme that helps Elixir looks really nice. So you can check out my blog post. It's on my thinkingelixir.com website. All right, Jason, do you have something you could recommend?
Yeah, I have a few picks. I think I'll start with so one of the things we actually do at PepsiCo eCommerce is actually create new products, actual new products like that people can eat. So we just launched a keto product called High Low Life, which is you could get it on Amazon or at High Low Life. Let me just find highlowlife.com. And I feel like I have to give a pick to my wife's company, just only because she's my wife. And it's also a great company, and what she's doing is really cool. So she has a wine company called My Vino, and she is doing a Indiegogo for some Oregon Pinot Noir. So I'm just gonna, because I know she's gonna listen to this, and I'm gonna wait till she listens to hear this. But I will post a link to sign up to get notified when it launches. I'm sure this is like the best possible marketing that can be done for her. Like the intersection here, the Venn diagram of Oregon Pinot Noir drinkers and,
Yes.
and Elixir engineers it's probably not a Venn diagram. It's just one circle.
Perfect overlap. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say those are my two picks there. The High Low Life, the wine's really good, but the High Low Life, the snack is awesome. So I would recommend it. It's online only right now, so you're not going to find it in any store because that's what we do over here. It's online only.
Great. Well, Jason, thank you for coming on. I had fun talking with you. And if people would like to follow you online or connect with you, where should they go to do that?
So my Twitter is Fertel, my last name. My GitHub is Fertel, my last name. Everywhere it's just Fertel, except for I stopped keeping up with it by the time Snapchat came out. So I don't have the Fertel Snapchat, but everything else you could reach me just /Fertel on everything. Yeah, and it was great chatting with you guys. Also, if anybody's interested in doing Elixir and doesn't want to go to Spiff, I think we always have a lot of openings because we're constantly growing this team. So feel free to apply. If you go to the PepsiCoJobs.com and just search probably Elixir is my guess. The jobs will come up. I hope they're there. I'll feel really horrible if they're not, but we could create the roles as soon before this gets launched, just in case.
All right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us next week on Elixir Mix.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit